Welcome to 13 Past Midnight.
My introduction to the Ouija board came early. At the age of 5, I spotted one at Woolworths and begged my mother to buy it for me, which she did. That in and of itself was amazing, considering that later in my life my mother wouldn't have laid hands on a planchette for love nor money. But back then, she saw no harm in it, and I sat gleefully in the back seat of the car with it on my lap during the ride home. Later that day, I convinced my mom to sit and play Ouija with me. She agreed, and we soon sat in kitchen chairs, knees touching, the Ouija board balanced on our laps. My first question to the Ouija was about the weather. I love snow, and there was a slight chance in the forecast for the following day. So I asked the mystifying oracle, as proclaimed on the box, if it would snow tomorrow, and was delighted when the planchette slid to the affirmative. In fact, it did snow the next day. Despite a chance of only 20% predicted, we ended up with a good 3 inches or so. A few days later, I cajoled my mom into playing with the board with me yet again. This time, my question for the board was about an LP of Christmas music my 5-year-old self desperately wanted. It was an older vinyl album I'd heard at kindergarten, probably manufactured in the late 1950s or early 1960s. Since it was 1968 at the time, the album was nowhere to be found among the racks of records at Woolworths or McCrory's or White Way or any of the places I normally found records. So, once again, we consulted the mystifying oracle. Sure enough, it provided us with the name of a fairly obscure record store on Market Square Mall in downtown Knoxville, Tennessee, about 25 miles from where we lived at the time. My mother looked in the phone book and found the number, gave the shop a call, a long-distance call even at that time. The old gentleman who answered the phone took down the information and said he'd call us back. I figured that was the end of that. But sure enough, about a half an hour later, the phone rang. It was the man from the record store calling back. He had managed to locate a used copy amongst the hundreds of records he had in his shop inventory. Elated, I made my mom promise me that we'd go buy it soon. And within a couple of days, we made the journey to Knoxville and returned with me clutching the much-coveted album. Ouija had done it again. Nowadays, just remembering the above sends chills up my spine. I've heard so many Ouija stories that started out like this, innocently enough, but later developing into an ever-darkening obsession with the board. Although my mom had bought the board for me, she knew enough from her family's seances and table tapping sessions to limit my use of the Ouija. Now, I would no more give a child a Ouija board than I would give them a loaded pistol to play with. What starts out as fun and games, Parker Brothers, makers of traditional board games, brought the Ouija to the masses, for crying out loud, can turn into an unhealthy obsession with something dark and unknown. While I firmly believe the Ouija can be used as a tool, I also think it has a propensity to be dangerous in the hands of someone who doesn't realize just what they're messing with. Other than a chance encounter with a Ouija board at a party in the early 80s, and an impromptu seance at a haunted house I lived in Las Vegas in the mid-2000s, both of which are recounted in my book, My Strange World, and also in videos here on my YouTube channel, I tend to give the mystifying oracle a wide berth. It can be very easy to open a door that cannot be easily closed.